Let's clear something up before we start. Not everyone who dislikes you is reacting to something you did wrong. Sometimes, people don't hate you. They hate what you represent. Your calm threatens their chaos. Your growth exposes their stagnation. Your boundaries feel like rejection to people who live on access. So if you've ever wondered, why do people turn cold for no reason? Or why does my presence trigger certain people? This video is for you. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to my new channel, James the Modern Stoic. This isn't just another philosophy channel. We take timeless Stoic wisdom and give it a modern, practical twist for today's world. Relationships, stress, social media, and personal growth. We break down why people act the way they do, why some relationships drain you, and how to live with calm, clarity, and control. If you want to go even deeper, join my Patreon community for exclusive insights and a space to grow alongside like-minded people. You can subscribe using the link in the description or the first comment. Let's explore these truths together and become stronger every day. 1. You don't chase people who pull away. One of the fastest ways to make certain people hate you is surprisingly simple. You don't chase them when they withdraw. You don't double text. You don't demand explanations. You don't collapse into anxiety trying to pull them back. You notice the distance and you let it exist. To emotionally healthy people, this feels normal, respectful, even. But to emotionally insecure people, this feels like rejection, abandonment, or arrogance, because many people are used to control, not connection. They've learned, often unconsciously, that pulling away gives them power. Silence becomes a test. Distance becomes bait. They expect you to chase, to reassure, to prove your value by scrambling. So when you don't, something breaks in them. They start telling themselves stories. Wow, so I meant nothing to them. They're cold. They think they're better than me. They never cared. But the truth is simpler and more uncomfortable. You just respect yourself enough not to beg for presence. You understand something most people don't. If someone wants to be in your life, they'll make room. If they pull away, you don't fight gravity, you let them go. And that makes people furious, because your calm exposes their strategy. Let's talk about how this actually plays out. Imagine a friend or partner who suddenly becomes distant. Replies slow down. Energy changes. Warmth fades. They don't say anything directly. They just withdraw. Most people panic here. They send long messages. They ask, "Did I do something wrong?" They apologize for things they don't even understand. They shrink themselves to restore closeness. But you don't. You notice the shift and you match it. You don't punish them. You don't cold shoulder them. You simply stop overextending where energy isn't being returned. No drama, no speech, no emotional collapse. From your side, this is self-respect. From their side, this feels like a loss of control, because now they are the one wondering. They are the one checking their phone. They are the one asking themselves why the silence didn't work. And instead of reflecting, many people choose resentment. They tell themselves you're detached. They say you're emotionally unavailable. They accuse you of being indifferent. But what they really hate is this. You didn't chase the version of them that withdrew. You didn't beg someone to stay half present. You didn't prove your worth through desperation. You didn't abandon yourself to keep them comfortable. That's not coldness. That's emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is deeply threatening to people who rely on push-pull dynamics to feel important. Here's the part no one likes to admit. Some people pull away not because they want space, but because they want reassurance. They want to feel missed. They want you to chase. They want proof that they matter more to you than your own dignity. When you don't give them that, they feel exposed. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects a hard truth. Their presence was optional, not essential. And that realization hurts. So instead of saying, "I pulled away because I needed reassurance," they say, "You're selfish." Instead of saying, "I wanted control," they say, "You don't care," not because it's true, but because it protects their ego. There's a Stoic principle hiding here. You cannot control who stays. You can only control how much of yourself you give away, trying to stop someone from leaving. You understand that chasing someone who pulls away doesn't create intimacy, it creates imbalance. So you choose balance, and that choice costs you some people. But here's the quiet victory most never see. The people who leave because you didn't chase them were never planning to stay without leverage anyway. They didn't want connection, they wanted proof of power. And you denied them that, not by confrontation, but by self-respect. That's why this kind of person often turns bitter afterward. They talk badly about you. They rewrite the story. Because it's easier to believe you're heartless than to accept that someone can walk away without chasing. But you weren't cold. You were grounded. You weren't indifferent. You were secure. And the people meant for you, the emotionally available ones, the steady ones, they don't pull away to test love. They communicate. They stay present. They don't require you to abandon yourself to keep them close. So if someone hates you because you didn't chase them when they pulled away, remember this: you didn't lose them, you revealed them. And that was never your fault. 2. You don't overshare. One of the most misunderstood reasons people grow uncomfortable around you is simple. You don't tell everyone everything. You don't narrate your pain in real time. You don't unload your trauma on first contact. You don't hand out your fears, plans, insecurities, or wounds just to feel seen. You let people earn access to emotionally grounded people. This feels natural to emotionally hungry people. It feels threatening because many people confuse intimacy with information. They believe closeness means total access. Every thought, every struggle, every weakness laid bare. So when you don't overshare, they start feeling shut out. They tell themselves, why are they so guarded? What are they hiding? Why don't they trust me? But the truth is far quieter and far more mature. You trust yourself first. You understand that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your inner world. Some people only want your story so they can judge it, gossip about it, or weaponize it later. And you've learned that lesson, so you speak thoughtfully. You reveal slowly. You choose depth over exposure. And that makes certain people deeply uncomfortable, because oversharing creates false intimacy. It gives people the illusion of closeness without responsibility. They get emotional access without emotional safety. You don't play that game. And the people who rely on fast bonding, they feel rejected by your restraint. Let's talk about how this shows up in real life. Picture a group setting, workplace, social circle, or even family. Everyone is sharing frustrations, insecurities, private details. The conversation is emotionally loud. Then there's you. You listen, you nod, you contribute, but selectively. You don't trauma dump. You don't reveal your deepest wounds for entertainment. You don't use vulnerability as currency. From your side, this is self-respect. From their side, This feels like distance. They start probing, asking personal questions too soon, fishing for details you clearly aren't offering. And when you gently redirect or keep things surface level, something in them tightens, because now they feel exposed, and you don't. They shared everything. You shared enough. That imbalance unsettles people. Some interpret your privacy as superiority. Others interpret it as secrecy. A few take it personally, as if you're withholding trust on purpose. But what they're really reacting to is this. They gave away pieces of themselves without protection. You didn't, and your restraint forces them to confront that choice. Here's the uncomfortable psychological truth. People who overshare early often do it to regulate anxiety. Talking fills silence. Disclosure fills emptiness. Being known feels safer than being alone. So when you don't overshare, you disrupt their emotional rhythm. Your calm highlights their urgency. Your boundaries highlight their lack of them. That's why they might label you as closed off, emotionally distant, hard to read. Not because you are, but because you don't leak yourself to feel connected. Let's get specific. Imagine someone asks you deeply personal questions early on about your past, your pain, your failures. You answer honestly, but briefly. You don't dramatize. You don't dive into detail. You don't owe anyone your wounds. And instead of respecting that, they feel insulted. Why? Because they equate access with value. If they can't access you fully, they assume you don't value them enough. But that's not how emotional safety works. You know that vulnerability, without trust, isn't bravery, it's exposure. So you pace yourself, and people who rush intimacy hate pacing. They want everything now. Your story, your softness, your weaknesses. Because once they have those, they feel close, or powerful, or important. And you deny them that, not aggressively, but quietly. That quiet refusal is what they resent. There's a Stoic wisdom here most people miss. Privacy is not secrecy, it is stewardship. You are the caretaker of your inner world, and caretakers don't leave the door unlocked for strangers. You share when it's safe. You open when it's earned. You speak when it serves truth, not validation. And yes, this costs you some people. The ones who wanted instant intimacy. The ones who confuse emotional dumping with depth. The ones who feel entitled to your story. They may gossip about you, call you mysterious, say you're hard to connect with. But here's what they won't say out loud. They're uncomfortable because you don't give them leverage. You don't hand them material to judge you by. You don't supply weakness for them to bond over or use later. You stay sovereign. And that kind of emotional sovereignty unsettles people who survive on access. But the right people, they respect your pace. They don't push. They don't purr. They don't rush closeness. They build trust over time. So if people dislike you because you don't overshare, remember this: you're not cold, you're careful. You're not distant, you're discerning. And you're not wrong for protecting your inner life in a world that consumes vulnerability without responsibility. That was never your fault. 3. You're not easily impressed. One of the most invisible reasons people grow uncomfortable around you is this: you don't hand out admiration for free. You don't gasp at status. You don't bow to titles. You don't inflate egos just to keep conversations smooth. You observe. You listen. You decide for yourself. To grounded people, this feels refreshing. To insecure people, it feels like judgment, even when none is spoken. Because many people don't actually want respect. They want confirmation. They want their achievements mirrored back at them, their intelligence applauded, their presence validated. So when you don't react the way they expect, something in them tightens. They start thinking, do they think they're better than me? Why aren't they impressed? Who do they think they are? But the truth is quieter and more unsettling. You just don't confuse noise with substance. You understand that real confidence doesn't demand an audience, and real value doesn't need exaggeration. So you stay neutral, and neutrality unsettles people who rely on reactions to feel important. Let's talk about how this actually plays out. Imagine someone telling you about their job, their money, their connections, their accomplishments. They're watching your face closely, waiting for the nod, the praise, the wow, and you respond calmly. You acknowledge, but you don't gush. You don't diminish them, but you don't elevate them either. From your side, this is respect. From their side, this feels like dismissal, because they weren't sharing to connect. They were sharing to be admired. And when admiration doesn't arrive, they feel exposed. Here's the psychological truth most people miss. Being impressed is a form of emotional currency. Some people spend their lives collecting it. They dress for it, speak for it, perform for it. So when you don't pay that currency, they feel robbed. They may label you as arrogant, cold, hard to please, not because you said anything cruel, but because you didn't feed the ego they brought into the room. Let's make this concrete. Picture a workplace setting. Someone constantly highlights their achievements, drops names, mentions how busy, how important, how respected they are. You listen without interrupting. You respond professionally. You keep things grounded. You don't inflate the moment. And over time, their tone toward you shifts. They become sarcastic, passive-aggressive, dismissive. Why? Because you didn't validate the identity they were trying to sell. Your calm reveals a frightening possibility. Their status isn't as impressive as they need it to be, and instead of reflecting, they resent you. Here's the part no one likes to admit. People who need to impress are often afraid of being ordinary. They fear that without applause, they disappear, so they seek reactions as proof of existence. When you don't provide that proof, they experience it as rejection. But your restraint isn't superiority, it's discernment. You understand that admiration should be earned through character, not announced through credentials. And because of that, you wait. You let patterns speak louder than performances. You let consistency matter more than spectacle. That patience frustrates people who want instant recognition. There's a Stoic principle hidden here. External markers, status, wealth, praise, are unstable. Character is not. You're not impressed by what can be taken away overnight. You're attentive to what remains under pressure. And people who've built their identity on fragile symbols feel threatened by that. So they distance themselves, or talk behind your back, or decide you're difficult. But what they're really reacting to is this. You can't be bought with surface-level success, and that makes you unpredictable. The right people, though, they breathe easier around you. They don't feel the need to perform. They don't feel measured. They don't feel ranked. Because you meet people where they are, not where they want to be seen. So if people dislike you because you're not easily impressed, remember this. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not unimpressed. You're discerning. And in a world obsessed with appearances, your refusal to worship them will always unsettle those who do. That was never your fault. 4. You're selective with your energy. One of the most unspoken reasons people grow resentful toward you is this. You don't give everyone the same access to your time, attention, or emotional presence. You don't show up everywhere. You don't answer every call. You don't engage in every conversation, just to be polite. You choose to emotionally healthy people. This feels normal, mature even. To emotionally entitled people, it feels like rejection, because many people mistake availability for connection. They believe if you're not constantly reachable, you're distant. If you're not always engaging, you're disinterested. If you don't show up on demand, you're selfish. So when you become selective, something in them tightens. They start thinking, why don't they have time for me? Who do they think they are? They've changed. But the truth is simpler and more uncomfortable. You didn't change, you just stopped overgiving. You learned that energy is finite, and you stopped spending it where it drains you. That realization alone makes people angry, because many relationships survive not on mutual respect, but on one person's constant availability. And when you step back, the imbalance becomes visible. Let's talk about how this shows up in real life. Imagine someone who reaches out only when they need something. Advice, emotional labor, attention. You used to respond instantly. You used to show up exhausted. You used to listen even when you had nothing left. Then something shifts. You pause before replying. You say no without explaining yourself. You protect your evenings. You prioritize rest. From your side, this is self-preservation. From their side, this feels like abandonment, because they were used to access, not consent. And when access is removed, resentment appears. They may accuse you of being distant. Say you're too busy now. Suggest you've become cold or selfish. But what they're really reacting to is this. They lost unlimited access to you. Your selectivity forces a question they don't want to answer. Was this relationship ever mutual? And instead of reflecting, many people project. Here's the psychological truth beneath it. People who depend on others for regulation resent boundaries. Your energy used to soothe them. Your presence used to stabilize them. Your availability made their chaos manageable. So when you withdraw that energy, they feel destabilized. Not because you harmed them, but because they never learned to self-regulate. Your boundaries expose their dependence. That's why they don't say, I relied on you too much. They say, you've changed. Let's make this concrete. Picture a workplace, a family system, or a social group. You're known as reliable, the listener, the one who always helps. Then you start choosing yourself. You stop volunteering for emotional cleanup. You decline invitations that drain you. You keep conversations shorter, and suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. People become passive-aggressive. They stop including you. They question your character, not because you did anything wrong, but because you disrupted an unspoken agreement. You were supposed to be endlessly available, and now you're not. There's a Stoic wisdom here most people miss. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Energy given without discernment turns into resentment. Energy protected with intention turns into peace. You understand that now, and that understanding costs you some people. The ones who benefited from your exhaustion. The ones who confused your kindness with obligation. The ones who never asked how much you had left. They may paint you as distant, unfriendly, unapproachable. But the truth is this: you didn't become selective to punish anyone. You became selective to survive. And the people meant for you, the healthy ones, they don't demand constant access. They respect your limits. They don't guilt you. They don't keep score. They meet you where you are, not where they want you to be. So if people dislike you because you're selective with your energy, remember this: you're not selfish, you're sustainable, you're not distant, you're intentional, and protecting your energy in a draining world was never your fault. 5. You stay the same around everyone. One of the most unsettling things you can do in a social world built on hierarchy is this. You stay the same around everyone. Your tone doesn't shift based on status. Your respect doesn't fluctuate with influence. Your personality doesn't bend to impress or submit. You don't perform differently for powerful people. You don't shrink around intimidating ones. You don't inflate yourself for admiration. You are consistent. To emotionally secure people, this feels grounding. To socially strategic people, it feels dangerous, because many people survive by adjusting themselves. They speak softer to authority. They exaggerate confidence around those they want to impress. They mirror personalities to gain favor. So when you don't do this, something in them tightens. They start wondering, why aren't they reacting? Don't they know who I am? Why aren't they trying? But the truth beneath their discomfort is simple. You don't need to change yourself to belong, and that threatens systems built on dominance, image, and leverage. Let's talk about how this plays out. Picture a room with mixed power dynamics, managers and juniors, popular people and outsiders, elders and youth. Watch how most people move. Their voices change, their posture shifts. Their laughter becomes selective. Then there's you. You greet everyone the same. You speak honestly, not strategically. You don't flatter up or punch down. From your side, this is integrity. From their side, this feels like defiance, because you're not playing the game. Here's the psychological truth. People rarely admit many social relationships aren't built on connection. They're built on position. People expect deference from below and admiration from the side. When you offer neither, just human-to-human presence, it disrupts the order. Some interpret your consistency as arrogance, others as disrespect. A few feel exposed, not because you're rude, but because you refuse to signal submission or superiority. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're at work. You speak to your boss the same way you speak to your colleagues. Respectful, clear, calm. No flattery, no fear, no performance. Your boss may feel unsettled, not because you're incompetent, but because you're not reinforcing their power through behavior. At the same time, peers may feel uneasy too. They expect you to complain downward and comply upward, but you do neither. You stay neutral, and neutrality is threatening in systems built on emotional leverage. Here's the deeper layer. People who change themselves around others often do it for safety. They learned early that acceptance requires adaptation, that survival requires reading the room and becoming what's needed. So when you don't adapt, they feel judged, as if your stability is pointing out their performance. But you're not judging, you're just not pretending. There's a Stoic principle hiding here. If your values change depending on who's watching, they're not values, they're strategies. You've chosen values. You don't abandon your tone, your ethics, or your self-respect to gain favor or avoid tension. And that costs you, because people who rely on social masks don't trust those who don't wear one. They can't predict you, they can't manage you, they can't place you neatly in a hierarchy. So they may label you as difficult, too direct, hard to read, not because you did anything wrong, but because you didn't perform the role they expected. But the right people, they feel safe around you. They know what they're getting. They don't feel manipulated or measured. They don't feel ranked. Your consistency becomes trust. So if people dislike you because you stay the same around everyone, remember this: you're not arrogant, you're aligned, you're not disrespectful, you're principled. And in a world that rewards shape-shifting, Your steadiness will always unsettle those who survive by masks. That was never your fault. 6. You don't gossip. One of the quietest reasons people become uneasy around you is this: you don't bond through gossip. You don't tear people down to feel close. You don't trade secrets for belonging. You don't participate in conversations that require someone else's absence to exist. You listen, but you don't add fuel to emotionally healthy people. This feels safe. To emotionally insecure people, it feels suspicious. Because gossip isn't just talking, it's a social currency. It creates instant alliances. Shared judgment becomes shared intimacy. Criticism becomes glue. So when you don't participate, something breaks. They start thinking, why are they so quiet? Do they think they're better than us? Can we trust them? But the truth is far simpler and far more grounded. You don't need negativity to connect. You understand that gossip gives people a false sense of closeness at the cost of integrity. And you've decided that price is too high. That choice unsettles people, because when you don't gossip, you refuse to validate their judgments. Let's talk about how this shows up. Imagine a group conversation. Someone isn't present. Their name comes up. The tone shifts. Criticism begins, subtle at first, then sharper. Everyone adds something. Everyone except you. You don't jump in. You don't defend aggressively. You don't condemn either. You stay neutral. From your side, this is restraint. From their side, this feels like resistance, because now the group feels exposed. They're speaking freely. You're observing. And that imbalance creates anxiety. They wonder, what will they say when I'm not here? Are they judging us? Why won't they join in? Here's the psychological layer most people don't see. People who gossip often do it to regulate insecurity. Criticizing others temporarily boosts self-esteem. It creates a sense of superiority and belonging. So when you don't join, you disrupt that regulation. Your silence removes the emotional payoff. And instead of questioning the behavior, they question you. They may label you as uptight, boring, too serious, not because you are, but because you didn't validate the dynamic they were using. Let's make this concrete. Picture a workplace. Complaints about management circulate. Someone's mistake becomes a running joke. Rumors start forming. You don't add details. You don't laugh along. You don't spread it further. Over time, the tone toward you changes. People stop sharing certain things. They lower their voice around you. They keep you slightly outside the circle. Not because you betrayed them, but because you didn't prove loyalty through negativity. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Gossip often functions as a test. If I speak badly about someone, will you agree? Agreement means safety. Disagreement or silence feels like threat. So when you don't gossip, you fail the test. And people don't like that. There's a Stoic principle here. What you say about others reveals more about you than about them. You choose speech that aligns with your values. You don't poison your mouth to feel included. That discipline costs you, because people who build bonds on judgment don't trust those who refuse to judge. They can't predict what you'll say. They can't manage the narrative through you. And that makes them uneasy. But the right people, they feel relief around you. They know their name is safe in your absence. They don't fear being the next topic. They don't feel measured. Your silence becomes trust. So if people dislike you because you don't gossip, remember this: you're not aloof. You're principled. You're not boring. You're grounded. And in a world where connection is often built on tearing others down, your refusal to participate will always unsettle those who rely on it. That was never your fault. 7. You're comfortable being alone. One of the most unsettling traits you can have in a world obsessed with connection is this: you're genuinely comfortable being alone. You don't panic in silence. You don't fill every gap with noise, messages, or people. You don't treat solitude as something to escape. You choose it. To emotionally secure people, this feels healthy. To emotionally dependent people, it feels threatening, because many people don't fear loneliness, they fear themselves. So when they see someone who can sit with their own thoughts without unraveling, it disrupts a belief they've lived by for years. They start thinking, how are they okay alone? Don't they need anyone? What's wrong with them? But the truth is the opposite. Nothing is wrong with you. You've made peace with your inner world, and that peace exposes a quiet insecurity in others. Let's talk about how this plays out in real life. Imagine someone who constantly needs company. They call, text, make plans back to back. Not out of joy, but out of avoidance. When you decline an invitation, you don't apologize excessively. When plans fall through, you're fine with it. When weekends are empty, you don't scramble to fill them. From your side, this is contentment. From their side, it feels like rejection. Because if you're okay alone, their presence doesn't define your stability. And that can feel deeply unsettling. Here's the psychological truth. Most people don't want to face. Some people use relationships to regulate their emotions. Being around others distracts them from anxiety, doubt, or emptiness. So solitude feels like danger. When they see you choosing solitude calmly, it highlights what they're avoiding. Your comfort becomes a mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable. Let's make this concrete. Picture a social group. Everyone's constantly making plans, staying busy, filling space. Then there's you. You enjoy the group, but you don't cling to it. You show up fully, then you leave when you're done. You don't linger out of fear of missing out. Over time, people notice. They joke that you're antisocial. They say you're hard to reach. They accuse you of being distant, not because you withdrew from them, but because you didn't need them to feel okay. And that challenges a deep assumption that being wanted is more important than being whole. Here's the deeper layer. People who are uncomfortable alone often mistake independence for emotional unavailability. They assume closeness requires constant proximity, that love requires continuous contact. So when you're at peace by yourself, they interpret it as coldness. But you're not disconnected. You're grounded. There's a Stoic truth here. If you cannot be content alone, you will always choose relationships out of fear, not choice. You've learned how to sit with yourself, to reflect, to listen. And because of that, you don't rush connection. You choose it intentionally. That intention threatens people who fear emptiness. They can't pull you closer with guilt. They can't trap you with attention. They can't destabilize you with absence. And that lack of leverage frustrates them. So they may withdraw, or criticize, or label you as strange. But the right people, they respect your autonomy. They don't take your solitude personally. They know your presence is chosen, not forced. So if people dislike you because you're comfortable being alone, remember this. You're not antisocial. You're self-anchored. You're not distant. You're complete. And in a world that uses noise to avoid depth, your comfort with solitude will always unsettle those who fear it. That was never your fault. 8. You see through performances. One of the most uncomfortable traits you can have is this. You see through performances without exposing them. You don't call people out. You don't embarrass them. You don't announce what you notice. You simply know. And that knowing changes how people feel around you. To emotionally grounded people, this feels safe. To performative people, it feels dangerous. Because many people aren't living from who they are. They're living from who they want to be seen. Confidence becomes a mask. Kindness becomes branding. Victimhood becomes leverage. Success becomes theater. So when someone sees through it without reacting, something inside them tightens. They start thinking, why are they so quiet? Do they see something? Are they judging me? But the truth is simpler and far more threatening. You're not impressed by the act. You're paying attention to the substance. Let's talk about how this actually shows up. Imagine someone who is always on. They speak loudly. They exaggerate stories. They emphasize how busy, how important, how good they are. Others respond with admiration, laughter, reassurance. You don't. You stay present, but neutral, engaged, but not dazzled. From your side, this is awareness. From their side, it feels like exposure. Because performances only work when the audience plays along. And you don't. Here's the psychological truth. Most people don't want to face. Performances are fragile. They require constant reinforcement, constant validation, constant agreement. So when you don't mirror back the image someone is projecting, you interrupt the illusion. Your silence becomes a threat. Not because you're cruel, but because you're not confirming the story they're telling about themselves. Let's make this concrete. Picture someone who presents themselves as endlessly kind, always helpful, always morally correct. But you notice inconsistencies. They're generous publicly, but dismissive privately, empathetic in words, but avoidant in action, supportive when it benefits them, but absent when it costs them. You don't confront them, you just adjust. You trust less. You engage carefully. You don't offer blind loyalty, and slowly they sense it. They feel your distance, your restraint, your discernment. And instead of reflecting, they resent you, because you didn't fall for the image. Here's the deeper layer. People who perform often need to believe their own performance. They repeat the story until it feels real. They surround themselves with people who affirm it. So when you quietly see the gaps, you become destabilizing. Your presence reminds them that the mask isn't seamless, and that's terrifying. They may start treating you differently. They become defensive, passive-aggressive, dismissive. They may accuse you of being cold, judgmental, hard to read. Not because you attacked them, but because you didn't affirm the illusion. There's a Stoic truth here. Character reveals itself in patterns, not performances. You watch how people act under pressure, how they treat those with nothing to offer, how consistent they are when no one is watching. And because you value that, you're immune to surface-level charm. That immunity unsettles people who rely on charm to survive. They can't manipulate you with stories. They can't control you with appearances. They can't anchor their identity through your approval. And that lack of leverage turns into hostility. But here's what matters. You don't expose people because you don't need to. Truth doesn't require announcements. It reveals itself over time. You simply move accordingly. And the right people, they relax around you. They don't feel the need to perform. They don't feel measured by optics. They don't feel watched. They can just be. So if people dislike you because you see through performances, remember this: you're not cynical, you're perceptive. You're not judgmental, you're discerning. And in a world where many survive by pretending, your quiet clarity will always unsettle those who fear being seen. That was never your fault. 9. You heal instead of hardening. One of the most confusing reasons people turn cold toward you is this: you didn't let pain turn you bitter. You didn't become cruel to feel protected. You didn't shut down your emotions to survive. You didn't make your wounds your personality. You chose to heal to emotionally mature people. This feels inspiring to emotionally wounded people. It feels threatening because many people bond through shared damage. Pain becomes identity. Bitterness becomes armor. Cynicism becomes proof of intelligence. So when you refuse to harden, something in them resists. They start thinking, how can they still be kind? Why aren't they angry like me? Do they think they're better? But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Your healing exposes what they're avoiding. Let's talk about how this actually shows up. Imagine two people who went through similar pain: betrayal, loss, rejection, trauma. One person decides, never again. They close off. They become sharp, sarcastic, guarded. The other, you does something different. You process the pain. You reflect. You feel the grief instead of burying it. You learn boundaries without becoming hostile. From your side, this is survival with dignity. From their side, it feels like betrayal, because if pain can be healed, then their bitterness becomes a choice, not a necessity. And that realization is deeply unsettling. So instead of asking how you healed, they resent you for it. Here's the psychological layer most people miss. For many, hardening feels safer than healing. Healing requires vulnerability. It requires accountability. It requires sitting with discomfort. Hardening feels easier. You build walls. You mock sensitivity. You wear detachment like strength. So when you stay soft, but not weak, you disrupt a common survival strategy. Your calm says, pain didn't win. Their bitterness says, pain defines me. That contrast creates tension. Let's make this concrete. Picture someone who prides themselves on being emotionally cold. They brag about not caring. They dismiss empathy as weakness. Then there's you. You're warm, but boundaried. You're open, but not naive. You're kind, but not self-sacrificing. Over time, their tone toward you shifts. They mock your empathy, call you too nice, suggest you'll get hurt again. Not because they're protecting you, but because your softness challenges their armor. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People who harden often need others to harden too. It validates their coping mechanism. It justifies their walls. So when you heal instead, you become a living contradiction. And contradictions are threatening. There's a Stoic wisdom here. Strength is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel without being ruled by it. You didn't erase pain. You integrated it. You learned discernment instead of distrust, boundaries instead of bitterness, wisdom instead of resentment. And that kind of strength can't be mocked away. But it does cost you people, the ones who built identity around suffering, the ones who fear that healing would dismantle who they've become. They may distance themselves. They may downplay your growth. They may say you've changed, but you did change. You got lighter, and the right people, they feel safe around you. They don't feel punished for past mistakes. They don't feel emotionally tested. They don't feel measured by old wounds. Your presence becomes calm instead of armor. So if people dislike you because you healed instead of hardened, remember this: you're not naive, you're resilient. You're not weak, you're integrated. And in a world that often confuses bitterness with wisdom, your healing will always unsettle those who chose to stay wounded. That was never your fault. 10. You exist as a mirror. One of the most unsettling things about you is not what you say or do. It's what people see in themselves when they're around you. You don't lecture, You don't criticize, you don't try to change anyone, you just exist. Clearly, calmly, honestly, and that presence reflects things back to people they'd rather not look at, to emotionally grounded people. This feels clarifying. To emotionally avoidant people, it feels threatening, because most people don't react to who you are. They react to who they become in your presence. They start noticing things they've been ignoring, their inconsistencies, their excuses, their unhealed wounds, their untapped potential, and instead of sitting with that awareness, they push it away, often onto you. They think, why do I feel uncomfortable around them? They make me feel judged. I don't like how I feel when I'm with them. But the truth is, you didn't create the discomfort, you revealed it. Let's talk about how this shows up. Imagine someone who's stuck in habits they don't like, in relationships they've outgrown, in a version of themselves they're avoiding. Then they spend time with you. You're not preaching self-improvement, you're just living aligned. You set boundaries, you speak honestly, you take responsibility for your life. And suddenly, something shifts inside them. Your presence highlights the gap between who they are and who they know they could be. That gap hurts, so instead of closing it, many people attack the mirror. They say you're too intense, too serious, too different, not because you are, but because it's easier to reject the reflection than to confront what it shows. Here's the psychological truth. Most people never realize self-aware people trigger self-avoidant people, not through words, through contrast. You don't shame anyone, you don't compare, but your clarity quietly asks a question they're not ready to answer. Why aren't I living like that? And that question creates friction. Let's make this concrete. Picture a group of people bonded by distraction, complaints, gossip, habits, avoidance. You join the group, not as a disruptor, but as someone who doesn't need those things to feel okay. You don't feed the cycle, you don't numb yourself, you don't join the complaining. Your calm becomes loud. People start reacting strangely. They feel restless around you. They talk more. They justify themselves unprompted, because mirrors don't accuse. They reflect, and reflection forces awareness. Here's the deeper layer. People who haven't faced themselves often rely on environments that keep them distracted. So when someone like you appears, someone steady, conscious, present, it removes the noise, silence appears. And in silence, truth shows up. That's why people sometimes project onto you. They call you judgmental when you're not judging, arrogant when you're simply secure, cold when you're just not reactive. Projection is easier than introspection. There's a Stoic truth here. You can't control how people interpret their own reflection. You're not responsible for the discomfort. Awareness creates. You didn't ask to be a mirror. You became one by living honestly. And yes, this costs you people. The ones who prefer distraction over depth. The ones who resent reminders of their own agency. The ones who aren't ready to face themselves. They may avoid you, criticize you, or quietly disappear. But the right people, they lean in. They feel seen, not exposed, challenged, not judged, inspired, not shamed. Your presence helps them remember who they are. So if people dislike you because you exist as a mirror, remember this: you're not confrontational, you're conscious, you're not triggering on purpose, you're truthful by nature. And in a world that often avoids self-reflection, those who live as mirrors will always unsettle those who fear what they might see. That was never your fault. 10. You exist as a mirror. One of the most unsettling things about you is not what you say or do, It's what people see in themselves when they're around you. You don't lecture, you don't criticize, you don't try to change anyone. You just exist. Clearly, calmly, honestly. And that presence reflects things back to people they'd rather not look at, to emotionally grounded people. This feels clarifying. To emotionally avoidant people, it feels threatening, because most people don't react to who you are. They react to who they become in your presence. They start noticing things they've been ignoring, their inconsistencies, their excuses, their unhealed wounds, their untapped potential, and instead of sitting with that awareness, they push it away, often onto you. They think, why do I feel uncomfortable around them? They make me feel judged. I don't like how I feel when I'm with them. But the truth is, you didn't create the discomfort, you revealed it. Let's talk about how this shows up. Imagine someone who's stuck in habits they don't like, in relationships they've outgrown, in a version of themselves they're avoiding. Then they spend time with you. You're not preaching self-improvement, you're just living aligned. You set boundaries, you speak honestly, you take responsibility for your life. And suddenly, something shifts inside them. Your presence highlights the gap between who they are and who they know they could be. That gap hurts, so instead of closing it, many people attack the mirror. They say you're too intense, too serious, too different, not because you are, but because it's easier to reject the reflection than to confront what it shows. Here's the psychological truth. Most people never realize self-aware people trigger self-avoidant people, not through words, through contrast. You don't shame anyone, you don't compare, but your clarity quietly asks a question they're not ready to answer. Why aren't I living like that? And that question creates friction. Let's make this concrete. Picture a group of people bonded by distraction, complaints, gossip, habits, avoidance. You join the group, not as a disruptor, but as someone who doesn't need those things to feel okay. You don't feed the cycle, you don't numb yourself, you don't join the complaining. Your calm becomes loud. People start reacting strangely. They feel restless around you. They talk more. They justify themselves unprompted, because mirrors don't accuse. They reflect, and reflection forces awareness. Here's the deeper layer. People who haven't faced themselves often rely on environments that keep them distracted. So when someone like you appears, someone steady, conscious, present, it removes the noise, silence appears. And in silence, truth shows up. That's why people sometimes project onto you. They call you judgmental when you're not judging, arrogant when you're simply secure, cold when you're just not reactive. Projection is easier than introspection. There's a Stoic truth here. You can't control how people interpret their own reflection. You're not responsible for the discomfort. Awareness creates. You didn't ask to be a mirror. You became one by living honestly. And yes, this costs you people. The ones who prefer distraction over depth. The ones who resent reminders of their own agency. The ones who aren't ready to face themselves. They may avoid you, criticize you, or quietly disappear. But the right people, they lean in. They feel seen, not exposed, challenged, not judged, inspired, not shamed. Your presence helps them remember who they are. So if people dislike you because you exist as a mirror, remember this: you're not confrontational, you're conscious, you're not triggering on purpose, you're truthful by nature. And in a world that often avoids self-reflection, those who live as mirrors will always unsettle those who fear what they might see. That was never your fault. None of the reasons people dislike you are your fault. It's not your calm that's wrong. It's not your boundaries. It's not your self-respect, your honesty, or the way you live your life with clarity. The truth is, some people hate you because you hold up a mirror they're not ready to look into. Some hate you because you refuse to play games they've built their lives around. Some hate you simply because you're strong enough to be yourself, and that scares them. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you're rare. It means you're someone who lives on your own terms, and that will always make waves. So don't shrink. Don't apologize for being selective with your time, your energy, or your presence. Don't soften your strength or dim your clarity to make others comfortable. Let people dislike you if they must. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to live fully, to grow, to heal, to be true. The right people, the ones meant for your life, will respect that. They will value it. They will stay. And the ones who leave, they were never yours to keep. So stand firm, stay calm, keep your boundaries, be quiet when needed, speak when necessary, and never ever apologize for being exactly who you are, because that is your power, and that is something no one can take from you.